party looking for other people, but then we saw...
Marc Bolan's family were left in shock. It seemed that Marc had died a pauper. Was he really only worth £10,000? How could that be?
I think that was all on paper. I don't think that was the case at all. Because his money was out the country.
For his family, a long quest now began to find out how much had disappeared, where it had gone to, and who was getting their hands on it.
None of my family have got anything from it. So it's just lying dormant, what we used to call the Bermuda Triangle. It's all missing. It's still there, but you can't get at it.
Gloria Jones left Britain badly injured, broken-hearted and penniless. She struggled for years to bring up their son in America.
I gave Roland the best that I could. If you could have seen us, you would have cried because we were actually poverty level.
Okay, Roland, can you hear me all right in there? Yeah. Okay, can I just get...
Roland was almost 2 years old when his father died.
I really don't have any memories of him at all. Hearing the stories, I have these visions in my head, so that's kind of become my memories, but, you know, I was just a little baby.
For 6 years, Bolan's son has been trying to find answers to why he cannot claim his birthright.
I don't think it's a matter of being owed, it's just the principle that I am his son, you know. It's just being fair. You know, that's all it is. All right, Mommy?
Oh, you're singing. Oh, you sound great.
Where's all the money gone?
This is what we're trying to find out. You have a very sensitive situation here. You have some issues that need to be cleared.
I was dancing when I was 12.
Marc Bolan didn't always have money. He was born Marc Feld into a half-Jewish family. He grew up in the East End of London.
The first house we lived in was in Stoke Newington. All we had there was a kitchen, one bedroom, front room, which was our bedroom. You wouldn't call it a slum, but it was deteriorating.
His adoring mother, Phyllis, worked on a market stall. His father was a lorry driver. Harry was Bolan's older brother.
The old-time cave dweller lived in a cave.
Mum and Dad got him his first guitar when he was 11.
Marc Feld was dyslexic, but that didn't hold him back.
From the beginning, he was going to be a pop star.
At 17, Marc Feld became Marc Bolan with his first record deal. A musical wizard was born.
Being a pop star was fine. He didn't really care if he was a singer, a pop star, or a model, but he wanted to be huge.
Come the sunset run across the sky. Cosmic eye is for you and no one else.
When I first saw him, he sounded like a combination of Muddy Waters and Larry the Lamb. You know, that bleating, quavering voice, which somebody once described as sounding like an old man, which it did, actually. It was a very kind of vulnerable, frail voice.
I met a woman, she's very close.
Bolan finally met the woman who could mix his business with pleasure. She was June Child.
June worked for Pink Floyd, and I think Marc sort of had a bit of a crush on her, and then they started going out together.
Big money was a long way off. They could barely scrape together the £2 a week rent for their attic flat in the heart of bohemian London.
They never had any money as such because it was going out on PAs and things like that, you know, and the little bits of equipment that he could afford at that time.
Marc was only 22 and June 4 years older when they married in January 1970. They were partners in love and business, but it was a business that would eventually tear them and June apart.
She was the strength behind Marc. She allowed him to concentrate on his music and his writing. If he wasn't writing, there were no hits, and no hits, no money.
With audiences under Bolan's spell, his performance fees rose to £100.
The university had phoned me up and said, you know, can we book Tyrannosaurus Rex, and we've got 50 quid, and I'd be bargaining for 100, and Marc would hear me and get on the phone and say, we'll do it for 25.
I don't think money was all that important to him. Maybe that's why he lost quite a lot of it.
Bolan was clever. He knew how to build a following.
He wanted money. It was just that he knew how to keep the right status quo with his audience.
After 4 albums, Tyrannosaurus Rex was still only a cult band. If Bolan was going to make those millions, he had to change.
He looked for something else again, and he turned to T-Rex with Mickey Finn. And that was much more the real Marc Bolan. And then you got the big hits.
What's it called, Mark?
Ride a White Swan. Call it White Swan for the...
White Swan, take 1. Roll it.
Write it all out like a bird in the sky was. Write it all out like you were.
Accused of selling out, Bolan didn't care. He had realized his dream. Overnight, he was a teen idol. Bolan gave his new fans extra value for money by having 2 songs on the B-side of his singles.
Well, he didn't like the idea of releasing the hit record on an album because he felt that was ripping them off.
At concerts, he shrewdly cut the price of tickets. Bolan's goodwill made good business sense.
If he put a ceiling on the admission charges, he would get a bigger crowd, and then the word would spread.
The response was spectacular.
All of a sudden it was fun making music. The screamers were there. It's like being with the Beatles.
The typical T-Rex concert became a sea of screaming teenage girls. T-Rextasy had arrived, and Bolan became one of the richest British rock stars of the 70s.
I think at that stage he felt, look at me, Ma, I'm on top of the world.
I don't mean to be bolder, but may I hold your hand?
Bolan became one of the few artists of the time who had the clout to wrestle power from the record companies.
I think that this is a time when artists were beginning to think of money as well as control.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Bolan wanted to have creative control of his music, so his wife June and their advisors created T-Rex's own record label.
And so he controlled his destiny, and he got considerably more money.
As Bolan cast his spell on the nation, a group of publishing companies were conjured up to run the T-Rex empire. These were Wizard Artists and Warrior Music. Warrior was jointly owned by Marc and June.
And Marc, I think, was 60% and June was 40%. It was very much Marc and June's company.
It was all a clever tax avoidance scheme. The idea was that half of T-Rex's songs were owned by Warrior Music, with record sales taxed in Britain. The other half was owned by Wizard Artists and claimed as written or recorded abroad, and so declared as foreign earnings to avoid tax. The stakes were high. In 1972, Bolan's songs earned more than £2 million.
He said, "Do you realise, man, I'm a millionaire?" I suspect you are.
Bolan and June could now afford to live the life of a rock star. They moved to an upmarket apartment block near Marble Arch.
Let's do a real one now. Feeling good. Is it distorted now?
The recording studio was where Bolan's wealth was created.
I think Marc was always aware of his finances. He was quick in the studio, and the idea was really to go in and get as much done as possible in a certain amount of time.
Time was money, and Bolan didn't waste a second.
Marc was famous for paying his band an incredibly low wage and no percentage.
When I began, I was on £40 a week, and after 2 years, I went up to £50 a week, and there it stayed.
At the time, Bolan bragged he was making £40 a second from his royalties.
Friends is fine, friends is good. Everybody says it's just like Robin Hood.
All I knew that it was Marc's band, and I was drumming for him, and I just got on with it. There's no point in holding any resentment.
T-Rextasy was at its peak, but power and success was now going to Bolan's head.
All artists are egotistical, but I mean, I think he was, he won a Nobel Prize in it at times.
Bolan and his managers even slashed the royalties of his producer, Tony Visconti. The man who'd helped make Bolan a star got a pay cut.
It upset him a great deal. His contribution to the game was looked upon in a negative way. All of a sudden, Marc was shitting on his friends, as it were.
She's faster than most, and she lives on the coast,
The next casualty would be Marc and June's marriage. On a lackluster tour of the US, Bolan's infatuation with a backing singer crossed the line. Now everything would be at risk.
Then I learned who Marc Bolan was. There's only one star. And I think that's why he liked me, because I never wanted to be a star. I just wanted to be his companion.
Gloria would become part of the band, and June would drift away. It was a love triangle that would end in tragedy for everyone.
With my Les Paul, I know I'm small, but I enjoy living anyway.
Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night and think, in another 20 or 30 years, I'm going to be 50 or 60. What shall I be doing? You don't?
Never think about it. I mean, I don't think I'll live that long. No.
Bolan was at the peak of his earning powers, but he could not have known how little time he had left. Bolan's paltry legacy of £10,000 didn't add up. The will implied Bolan had fame but no fortune. The facts implied he was loaded. So where was it, and how much? Bolan had ruled the British charts of the 70s, a strutting, sequined icon with 39 million records sold.
Fame equals money. He was interested in fame, but fame brought money.
And money brought the attention of the taxman.
Nobody likes paying income tax, especially the rates you used to have to pay in them days.
I mean, they were taxing, I think, about sort of 99p in the pound or something. So he was, for every record he was getting a penny, and the taxman was getting the rest.
Worse still, new tax laws in 1973 meant that Bolan's huge overseas earnings were now taxable, even if he was living in Britain.
So there was a powerful incentive to mitigate the effects of tax at the time.
Bolan's companies, Wizard and Warrior, would have to go offshore, and he would have to go too. He was not alone. The biggest earning rock stars left Britain in droves.
And everybody went abroad, or at least they put their money abroad.
The new home for Bolan's wealth became a series of offshore companies controlled by Wizard Bahamas.
Well, it's a very legal income tax evasion. That was on advice of his accountants.
Marc and June's business interests were still locked together. Marc and June, however, were not.
There had been 2 or 3 affairs that June had discovered, and Gloria was the last of those affairs. And it was the final straw.
June confronted Bolan in a Chicago hotel.
June said to Marc, "It's her or me. Make up your bloody mind."
We were all in the limousine, and he took her to the airport.
6 days later, in Florida, Marc had made up his mind.
He said, "I love you, Glo." I knew that I loved him.
I think it was June that really made the break and said enough was enough. And I think it damaged him emotionally.
Bolan's new management moved fast to protect the business from the costly fallout of a looming divorce.
Marc Bolan, with his advisors, had decided that June was to be cut out of everything.
June lost her stake in Warrior Music, the business she owned with Marc. The assets of the company were shipped abroad, and she did not get a penny.
She was gutted. She felt betrayed. She felt that all the work she put into the business had gone up in smoke.
To further hide his money from June, Bolan gave away control and ownership of his money to foreign trusts run by bankers and lawyers.
When someone sets up a foreign trust, it is quite common for that trust to be set up in a way which means that it is not in the control of the person who generates the income that goes into the trust.
The formation of these trusts denied the taxman Bolan's millions. It also denied June access, but it fatally took control of his money out of his own hands.
I think June was very angry with Marc's professional advisors, but felt also bitter that Marc had treated her so badly.
Separation from a wife is like a partnership ending, and if the wife was a partnership in the business, then you would look to sever that relationship as well. It's as cold and calculating as that, I'm afraid.
On the 17th of October, June left their luxury flat and superstar lifestyle forever.
Marc was very much that once you're gone, you're gone. You're a yesterday's person. And for a while, June was yesterday's person.
Just 2 days after June left, Marc Bolan made his will. The two women in his life were named, June as his wife and Gloria, the woman he'd left her for, as his secretary.
And we walked in and he said to his mom, "This is my secretary, Gloria." She said, "I knew you weren't the secretary."
Marc Bolan became a tax exile, and for a while he wallowed in the fruits of his success.
Once, when he received a royalty statement that he had made a lot of money, he called the bank and he says, "I want to see 50,000 pounds on the table." So he went to the bank and they brought it out so that he could see what it looked like. He wanted to see what did it look like. We actually lived 3 months in Monte Carlo, 3 months in America. I mean, it was just like a non-stop party.
Living in Monte Carlo, Bolan was a lonely rock star, trapped in a rich town.
When I first joined, he was living in Monte Carlo, and they used to have to send him tapes of the Sweeney and stuff, yeah, a bit of contact from home. So he wasn't happy there. He hated it there.
He missed the fact that he could just ring the office and say, "I want to rehearse today, man," you know. He was stuck there. It was like being in a prison, I suppose.
The party soon wound up as Marc felt the pressure of his waning stardom.
Well, 74, 75 was Marc's lost weekend. His lifestyle changed. He was no longer a vegetarian. He was drinking brandy and vodka and copious amounts. He was putting a lot of cocaine up his nose and basically abusing himself.
Whatever happened to the teenage dream?
He was taking copious amounts of cocaine. He was drinking like a fish. He'd put on vast amounts of weight. He was obnoxious.
Tortured by self-doubt and frustration, Bolan took it out on his closest companions.
He could be violent. He could be violent, but he didn't abuse me. He didn't abuse me. Very lucky.
I think he was an unhappy man who was looking for something and never truly found it.
Marc Bolan was down, but not for long. When Gloria was expecting his child, he decided to return from tax exile.
And I heard that he had to pay back taxes for 2 years. So he was prepared to pay that for the privilege of coming and back into living in England.
Okay, now if the whole problem's really gotten by, if we get the intro together, the rest of it's a piece of cake.
Despite the tax burden, he decided that his destiny was back home, where it had all begun.
It's a letdown.
His roots were in England, and his family were in England.
Just me on my own. Just a film.
Bolan went on a low-key tour of Britain. He'd feared he'd lost his following, but quite the reverse. The show sold out. 2 months later, Roland Bolan was born.
Should be a law against stars giving children silly names, personally. I think Roland Bolan, I mean, give me a break.
It gave him a sense of responsibility, personal responsibility. He was happy then. He was fulfilled.
Bolan bought his first home and settled down in modest rock star luxury. It was just a mile from his parents' council flat, but it was a world away from his roots. During the first 2 years of his life, rock star child Roland often slept in their council flat. Today, Roland revisits the home where his grandparents once lived. At his mum's house, Bolan was plain old Marc Feld again.
They didn't even know he was a star. They didn't. That wasn't important in their life.
He was no longer the star he'd been, but neither was he the businessman he thought he was.
How do you get on as a businessman? Are you very hard? Like
I'm not a businessman, you know. I'm still a little kid. I just do what I want to do and hope it works out, you know.
Well, that's the best way of getting out of it.
I cheat a lot as well, you know.
I don't think Marc was in control of his business affairs ever. I don't think he would have recognised a ledger if he'd seen one.
Back in Britain, Bolan experienced the chilly realization that his business was running out of cash. The storm clouds were gathering.
I would get a message from Wizard saying, you know, sit on the money, don't give him all the money in one go. Rationing. It's just a feeling that there was something wrong, that the house of cards was beginning to fall.
He went to his office and he was told that he would have to cut on his spendings, and he just couldn't understand it. So one day he said to me, he says, can we live off of $1 million? And I said, well, of course we can.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds had gone down the drain in risky investments, and the taxman was hammering at the door.
As far as he was concerned, he was £80,000 in debt, which he was going to pay off out the automatic royalties and be all clear with the taxman.
But I think, like a lot of people, he just trusted other people to take care of it for him and, you know, thought that they would. But it turns out that they probably didn't.
With debts mounting, Bolan took action. In March 1977, he dumped his legal team and brought in a new accountant and lawyer. With marriage to Gloria on the cards and a young son to bring up, Bolan was just starting to put his life in order. But late that summer, tragedy struck.
He was a very peaceful Marc. The only visible signs was a small black mark on his temple, and from what we've been told, he died virtually instantly.
I felt that I had lost my best friend. I felt that I had lost someone who I knew loved me.
I was dancing when I was 12.
The star-studded funeral took place at Golders Green Crematorium.
Marc would have loved it because there were so many people there. It was a good send-off.
I was dancing when I was out. I was dancing when I was out.
Oh, won't be a minute.
I danced myself right out the room.
Oh, it was a pandemonium, really. There was hysterics going on, and there was a lot of people there.
I always remember thinking, I wish it was bigger. I wish it was more flamboyant. I wish it was more like Hollywood.
The main arrangement was a huge white swan. It was from the management of the day. And I thought to myself, yeah, and you paid for that as well, Marc.
The T-Rex business had ceased to exist practically overnight.
Got a telegram to the office saying, "Dear Mickey, you were a power of strength to Marc." we no longer require your services, but I'm sure there'll be a little something in the will for you. I'm sure Mark would have provided for you. And that was it.
I never heard another thing from the business from that moment on.
Written in 1973, the will was almost worthless. It contained a long list of bequests and no money to pay them.
Well, my mum and dad, of course, and Gloria, and June. Quite a variety of people on it, except for me, which I'm got no hard feelings about at all, because we had an understanding at the time.
I was sad that he didn't actually remember me, even if it just said, and I'd like to say to my roadie, I love my roadie Mick O'Halloran. Would have been nice, you know. Or even he was a tosser or whatever, you know.
But the Bolan estate was broke. The bulk of his fortune was now safely stashed in his offshore trust, Wizard Bahamas. The chaos Bolan had left his family in was now all too clear. Gloria was mentioned in the will, but their son Roland wasn't. Worse still, Bolan had died just weeks away from a final divorce from June.
He was between decree nisi and decree absolute, so he was still married to June.
The tragic timing of Marc Bolan's death would cause years of heartache and mystery. Did a second will exist? And if so, could it hold the key to unlock Bolan's missing millions? Marc Bolan's death in 1977 left his legacy in a tangle of rumour and myth. What had been in Bolan's mind the night he died? Had he written a second will? What were his plans for his partner Gloria and their son Roland? For decades, the tree into which Bolan's Mini crashed has been a shrine for fans. Now, for the first time, Gloria has come back to the crash site where her tragedy began.
I thought it was a very big moment for me and her to be together there, and it took my mom 25 years to get there.
It's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. To make the journey to the tree was closure with my son. I loved him and still love him. He's gone, but this man was a part of my life, the father of my child.
I know how hard it is for her, and that's why I was there to be there to support her.
Gloria was seriously injured in the accident. When she left hospital, her nightmare had only just begun. Because Gloria was not married to Bolan, she had no legal status, no income, and no home.
We, the family, lost everything. We didn't have a right to anything. Pictures, records, nothing. We were not even allowed to go into the home.
I mean, I think Gloria's position was completely tragic for her child who'd lost his father.
I was hurt because I was shut out, but not so much for myself, but for our son, Roland. Right upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
That was your room.
Okay.
That was going to be your room. It was a small yard because your dad used to work.
Everything would have been so different if Bolan had made a second will.
I believe he did write a second will. I cannot conceivably believe any father would not have written a second will to encompass his son.
With hindsight, that maybe it would have been sensible for a will to have been made in contemplation of divorce.
Bolan was only 3 weeks short of a final divorce from June when he died. With so much at stake, it's hard to believe that Bolan did not make plans for a new will.
I discussed with Mark in great detail many things about his personal life, but my discussions with Mark about what he might or might not have put in a will are between me and a client, and although that client is dead, that is not something that I wish to discuss on television.
A new will would have saved a family home, and secured a future for Bolan's son.
Marc was about to make a new will, and that would have happened in 3 weeks, and Roland would have been protected. And this is the reason that in January we were planning our wedding.
You can say with hindsight, why wasn't a will made? But why weren't quite a few other things done? And the reason was Marc died very prematurely.
In life, Bolan was T-Rex. Bolan was the business. In death, everyone wanted a piece of him.
There are various rumours that things were stolen, things disappeared. Things were certainly sold by the estate, I imagine.
What was not stolen by fans was sold by the Bolan estate to pay its tax bills. 5 years after his death, Bolan's parents were invited to browse the leftovers.
One of the solicitors turned around and said, well, Mrs. Feld, if you want to make us an offer or anything before it's sold, you can have it. So that they actually asked her to make an offer on her own boy's goods. She told the solicitor exactly where to get off.
Bolan's parents spent years trying to understand what happened.
They knew there was more, but we just couldn't chase it. We didn't have the education or the money to be able to understand it.
Bolan's parents died none the wiser in 1991. They now lie together with their son. His brother Harry got nothing from Bolan's will, but he did get back something stolen by fans.
This is the hat that Marc wore in Born to Boogie. Around the outside it's got Alice in Wonderland. There's a pair of shoes that he used to wear on stage. See, they've got built-up heels because he was quite short. Acoustic guitar. It's nearly in tune from the day Marc tuned it, and that's 25 years ago.
Nothing was sacred as any remnant of Bolan's life and work was bought and sold. But the most shocking effects didn't show up until 10 years after his death.
I received a phone call asking me if I knew that the undertaker that had handled Marc's body was trying to sell the clothes that Marc was actually killed in for a charity.
Harry demanded them back.
Nobody sells blood-stained clothes. I just wanted a final shutdown on it, so I just burnt them and buried them in my back garden.
Despite their separation, Bolan's estranged wife June was devastated when Marc died. But it would get much, much worse for her. As an act of charity, Bolan's offshore trust sent widowed June a cheque. When she cashed it, the taxman made the connection between June and Bolan's offshore companies. Back in 1973, Bolan had set up his offshore empire to avoid the crippling taxes of the time. After his death, the taxman discovered that he had never paid any tax at all.
Marc's companies were managed appallingly. I believe that no back tax had been paid for over 6 years.
No, nothing had been paid from 70 to 77.
I can only say that for Marc not to have paid any tax probably got up the nose of the Inland Revenue severely.
To get at the unpaid tax from Marc's offshore companies, the taxman could now use the unlikely target of his widow, June. On paper, she was still a director of Warrior Music, which meant June could be held responsible for unpaid tax from the very company she'd been cut out of years before.
The major assessment was for £170,000. June had no money to pay it.
Stunned, June was forced to take legal action against the Wizard Empire to recover her share of the company.
The Inland Revenue used her as a pawn to get at Marc's charitable trust and other interests.
The taxman was claiming that the whole Bolan empire altogether owed almost £3 million in unpaid taxes.
The Inland Revenue and the Marc Bolan offshore companies and Warrior and June all made a settlement.
A deal was struck. 6 years after Bolan's death, the taxman at least got a large share of Bolan's missing millions. They'd used June to get it.
And they were very, very ruthless about it. Well, they were entitled to do it, but it stank.
It was 10 years before June herself received recompense from the Wizard Empire. And within weeks of the settlement, she died of a heart attack on holiday in Turkey.
She was deprived of what she felt, and I think most people feel was a rightful inheritance.
Every year, there are fewer people to ask what happened to Bolan's millions. So many have died untimely deaths that many speculate on whether there's a curse hanging over Bolan's legacy. His original partner, Steve Took, died in 1980, choking on a cocktail cherry while stoned on drugs. Bass player Steve Curry died in a car accident in Portugal, and Mickey Finn died after years of drug abuse in 2003.
I mean, I don't believe in this curse situation, but I mean, it's been an unlucky band in the sense that people haven't looked after themselves.
In much better health is the offshore Bahamian trust that Bolan had set up before he died. T-Rex still sells, and the money rolls in, invested and reinvested by professionals based in London and the Caribbean.
The money from all of Marc's creations goes into an account in the Caribbean. It used to be in the Bahamas, it's now moved to the Caymans. Offshore accounts.
No one will say how many millions there are or where it goes, and trust law means no one has to or ever will.
Why is anyone's private affairs a secret? I think quite rightly it should be a secret. I don't think it should be in the public domain.
I have no idea where the money goes. On a need-to-know basis, I do my job to the best of my ability, and that's as far as I take it. Don't know how you feel about that answer, but best you're gonna get.
I did read a while ago that it was something in the region between 23 and 25 million.
I would expect it to be in 7 figures, possibly substantially in 7 figures, but I have no idea.
People are assuming there's all of this money. It's not going to be what they think it is, because this man has been milked for 25 years.
You can't expect lawyers to work for free. You can't expect accountants to work for free. And you never expect bankers to work for free.
Bolan's money certainly doesn't go to his band. Bill Legend, sole survivor of the original T-Rex, has never received a royalty check. He now plays drums for his local church. T-Rex keyboard player Dino Dines gets nothing. He now teaches and guests with the tribute band T-Rextasy. Mick O'Halloran, Bolan's loyal roadie for 9 years, almost died himself in 1977 and has not worked since. He's not received a penny from Bolan's missing millions. Bolan did name a list of beneficiaries of the Bahamian Trust. Some benefit, some do not. None of the recipients are on the public record.
If the trustees were doing their duty, they'll have been round the beneficiaries and formed a view as to whether they should benefit. And some of them may have benefited more than others, and some less than others.
One thing is certain. Apart from a modest trust for his son's education, no member of Bolan's family has received anything at all from Wizard Bahamas.
Nice to see you.
Hi, mate. Looking good.
When Marc expired, you had various people making decisions. I think they overlooked the fact that he did leave a family.
The simple fact is that he is Marc's son, and he should benefit from it.
He's the heir to Marc Bolan. He's the only child.
Bolan had named his offspring as beneficiary of his Bahamian trust, but his untimely death would throw up one more cruel twist.
My awareness is that under Bahamian law, children born out of wedlock don't have a legal status.
Is this an anomaly in the law that means although he's his son by blood, he just can't claim it?
This single anomaly has for 25 years prevented Roland from claiming what his father clearly wanted him to have.
He wouldn't be very happy at all because of the fact that Roland hasn't got his birthright.
And I think it's fair to say that, so far as Gloria is concerned, I'm sure he would have wanted things to work out differently.
For Roland, it's now possible that his fight for justice may be almost over.
The Bahamas Trust it's an awkward situation. Seems to be coming right.
He's going to be receiving his due.
After a quarter century, Bolan's trustees are finally going to recognize his status as Marc Bolan's sole heir.
He wanted me to be smart. He wanted me to not make the same mistakes as him.
Groove a little. Here's the tape running. Yeah. Okay. Tone. Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Death robbed the pop business of a true British talent, an eccentric electric wizard. It robbed his son of a father, his parents of a son. And it robbed Marc Bolan of the chance to sort out the mess of his missing millions.
Well, you damaged the soul of my soul. You pulled my love out by the roots, but I'm not such a bad boy. Oh no, you ravished the runes of my tunes.
Find out who got Michael Hutchinson's millions next Saturday at 9:05.